Alright everyone, time for another Vermont issues video here. I've gotten sort of back into the swing of these. After episode 150 I let it go because it never generated as much interest as many views. But then I realized, hey, if I'm going to live in Vermont, it'd be nice to have something that's sort of local, number one. And, you know, there is some news out of Vermont that's kind of worth reporting on. I just won't make it a daily thing. It'll be like a couple times a week. We got to talk about this because they've developed a new cockamamie scheme to prevent the hemorrhaging of Vermonters leaving the state. They're going to free up $80,000 to try to attract people, residents, to come to Vermont and visitors. So like a tourist thing. That's pointless. The biggest thing that you can do is downtown beautification projects and things like that. If you want Vermont to attract more people for tourism purposes, number one. Encourage flower planters out front. Have you gone through some of the towns in Vermont that have begun to do this? They look better than the towns that haven't. It's just the way that it is. Downtown beautification projects, trying to zone things in an efficient manner as opposed to worrying because the scarlet woodlouse has a habitat behind this business, so we can only zone it in certain ways. Another thing, and this is the biggest problem with Vermont as far as zoning, building and stuff, is that every other building is a historical landmark. And so there's a very, very strong limitation on what you can do with them. It's like, barns and stuff. A farmer's barn from 100 years ago can be considered a historic landmark. And so it just sort of decays until the state decides to do maintenance because they won't let the farmer slap a coat of paint on it because it's an endangered monument or something. I wish this were an exaggeration, but that's sort of how the state works. This prevents normal function. When you get to the point where you've got more statues of leaders than you have leaders because you're chasing everyone out of the state, that becomes a problem. I therefore have a counter suggestion. Don't free up $80,000 to tell people how great Vermont is. Free it up and make it great. Make it better than it is. Fix some potholes in the road. Put in new curbs. You know, another thing, beautification can take multiple forms. Right now, we use very standard style road signs. Make them look like something out of The Hobbit. Like literally, make it look artsy, hipsterish and stuff. It is pleasant. It does look nice. Make the whole state look more rustic and tourist friendly and have, you know, their mochaccino shake stands on the corner and stuff like that. We're already a hippie state. It's already full of West Coast hipsters that come to UVM anyway. We might as well just fucking embrace it if we're not going to do anything else. Look, the amount of work to make Vermont an industrial state, like some of its contemporaries, is probably prohibitive. Let's just be honest. We get a lot of mountains. The terrain alone makes it difficult to do that sort of thing in the state. Let's maintain, though, the farms we have. Let the farmers do their farming, number one. Help the dairy farmers. That's a big tourist draw. Disproportionately, you hand a dairy farmer $1,000, you get $10,000 back in tourism money, so it's okay. That kind of protectionism, as long as we're operating on a larger national stage, is almost necessary if you want to have any agriculture at all. Again, tourism money. Think of it that way. I know the people up in Montpelier, they only care about money. They don't care about the farmers for any other purpose. So help them. Go ahead and plant trees. At the same time, why don't you actually do more managed forestry work and actually extract some of the lumber there, creating new habitats, which, by the way, are better for things like deer than old-growth forest anyway. There's a little bit of this that goes on in the state, but not a whole lot. Free up additional land in areas that are capable of being settled for development purposes in certain areas. Make development zones in Vermont that are capable of sustaining a population. And for Christ's sake, drop the tax rate. The taxes alone drive people out. What happens in Vermont? Family in Vermont. Ma and Pa and little baby Timmy. Little baby Timmy gets a great education, great health care in the state of Vermont. Doesn't matter if he goes to what Vermonters consider a subpar school. Trust me, if you've gone anywhere else in the country, you've seen the real side of our federalized education system. Vermont simply does it better by taking the reins at the state level as much as possible. This also happens in New Hampshire. There's a reason that we're usually number one and number two in the country or thereabouts. I think Vermont's number two now. I think actually Minnesota managed to eclipse us for a while. And Utah, I believe, is right up there, if I remember correctly. Or that could be quality of life. Or longevity, I can't remember. Big problem. Mormon clean living, I guess it's got something going for it. what happens is that little Timmy goes to a good kindergarten, pre-K in many cases, goes to a good elementary school, goes to a good middle school, goes to a good high school. He gets out of high school, NHS and all these accolades, AP courses and all this wonderful things that Vermont can offer. Probably goes to an in-state college and then leaves the state. Or leaves the state to go to college because all of our in-state tuitions are so high. They are. Castleton may be a little bit less so, but let's say that little Timmy wants to go to a school comparable to UVM. He can go to UVM and pay $40K a year. Or he can go to some other state university, even paying the out-of-state tuition, and pay less. Well, he's going to go elsewhere. And then he'll go work on an oil rig, and he'll come back when he's 55, retires early to his McMansion up in the Green Mountain foothills. And that's sort of how Vermont has worked for about 30 years. Well, why don't we try something different? Freeing up 80K or whatever, the state has already tried this. We've already tried to stand toe-to-toe with other states to attract businesses and attract residents, and we're saying, well, we'll let you live partially tax-free here for several years if you move in as an entrepreneur. They've literally tried to pay people who fall under my description to move to the state. If I had been born anywhere but Vermont, I could move to Vermont and get a whole bunch of money from the state government. Isn't that very interesting? But they don't want me to stay in the state. They make no effort to do so. Instead, what they do is they actually up the taxes even further. So people who have roots in the state get fucked and end up paying for people who have barely moved to the state, who might even just move out as soon as that period's over anyway. They've done the same with business. Oh, if you move a business in, we'll forgive your taxes for 10 years or some stupid shit like that. Well, why don't you simply do that for businesses that are already in the state? Why don't you do that for local businesses that have been there in some cases for a fucking 100 years? Remember that restaurant, the Kong Chow in Rutland? Now, it went out of business in the 2000s. It was quite a time ago. It's been replaced by the Kong Chow Fusion. They've still got good food, by the way. You go check it out. It's the Vietnamese coffee is really great. The teriyaki tastes the same, so it's a big boon for me. But there was a business, they're family owned, I knew the family, and it had been in their family for, 70, 80 years. They were a 30s or 40s era restaurant. Some of the decor was still basically the same. They got pushed out by increased rent and by taxes. Why did the state not help them instead of throwing a bunch of money to other businesses to come into the Rutland area? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can't possibly argue that it's efficient to do business that way. They'd rather, I guess, chase everyone that's in the state out and get new people. Well, good luck trying to find people who can deal with the state tax rate. The weather alone makes it difficult. Look, we're a landlocked, climactically inhospitable state, which is primarily heavily forested, undevelopable mountains. I don't mind the ruggedness. A lot of other people don't mind the ruggedness. But it's a little bit like Alaska. And so if you're going to have a stable economy, you need to find those hardy people that want to settle down there and remain there and incentivize them to stay instead of constantly trying to bring in new people who half the time will leave anyway. Bring in a new family and little Timmy leaves for college, doesn't come back until he's got gray hair. That's not a way to improve our state's finances. It's not a way to have a Vermont. At some point you don't have really Vermonters because there's nobody who has long-term roots in your state. The number has already been dwindling. Most of the newcomers to Vermont throughout the late atomic era were West Coasters. The reason the state flipped blue is because of outsiders moving to the Champlain Valley region, either to be professors or work at IBM or to start a vineyard or something. Hipsters, the early wave, like post-hippie people. Some of which became yuppies without voting Republican in our particular state. So there's your Vermont issues video of the day. $80,000, woohoo. That'll build one house. What the fuck is that supposed to do? Encourage the localities. Drop the tax rate for parts of the state that want to beautify themselves. Put in new curbs. Fix your roads. Put up neat signs. Have each city choose a city flower and plant it everywhere so that it looks a little bit like a Skyrim sort of thing. Why don't you do that? Make the state look better than it currently does, and then, drop the tax rate. People will come in on their own. Oh, but that'd be a free market. Oh my God, we can't have that, Phil Scott, our fucking poser, sellout, dumbass governor. He is a dumbass. He's got an R after his name. I don't know why. He should have a D after his name, and not for Democrat, but for dumb. He doesn't know what he's doing. $80,000. Christ. Yeah, you can barely make ends meet in Vermont with $80,000 a year because of the tax rate, because of the cost of living and the cost of transportation and school budgeting and stuff. Great schools, and then people move out. Wonderful. I would like a Vermont that's livable for people who have actually attempted to live there long term. Instead, we give fuel assistance and like holiday gift baskets to old people to keep them from starving to death, while we're trying to throw money at some hipster from California to set up a Starbucks. I just don't like that. I think Vermont should look to the past to build its future. But that's just me. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I'm old-fashioned. I like the fact that Vermont has farms and shit. Like, woe is me. That's about all. Peace out.